Hello, this is Barrett from C4 Cyber Club here at Cypress College, and welcome to part two of our cybersecurity awareness training. In this video, I'm going to cover the cybersecurity checklist, which primarily focuses on Windows systems. We'll also touch on mobile devices, wireless router settings, and also Zoom security and privacy settings as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. This is the outline of what the slides and presentation will cover. Feel free to pause this if you'd like to take a look, just to get familiar with the terminology. I'm going to go ahead and get going on these slides. So one of the most important things for Windows and even other systems too, Mac and Linux, is do not run regularly on the administrator account. So by default, it may set you up as the administrator, but what you want to do is create a standard login account, and that way you're only entering in the administrator password when you need to do specific system settings or maybe install some particular software. And the reason why is if your system is ever compromised, the attacker will not have administrator privileges. They will not be able to access administrator services or run maybe a additional malicious software that they created as the administrator. Updating is very, very crucial as well. Anytime there's a new vulnerability that's found, I mentioned in the first part of the video, we talked a lot about threat intelligence community. There's a lot of, shared knowledge and shared resources in a cybersecurity community. So that's when patches are created, updates are created, not only for Windows, but also for applications as well. So it's super important to stay updated. That way that all known vulnerabilities will be patched for your systems. You can run antivirus with Windows Defender. So this is definitely something you'll want to have activated on your system. And you could use a firewall. So this is giving you what we talked about in the first video, layer of defense or defense in depth. You can use this firewall to block a lot of incoming traffic, since a lot of cases, most people are just needing outbound traffic from their computer to the internet. Using Chrome or FireFox is highly recommended instead of Internet Explorer or Edge, which over the years have been pretty susceptible to attacks or having vulnerabilities. So me personally, I like Firefox, but Google Chrome is also a very good choice. So Windows offers family safety. It's a very good way to protect your kids online, set good screen habits. You can monitor their activity, see how long they're on the system. You could also put blocks on certain purchases. We don't want your kids, racking up a huge credit card bill, buying, I don't know, Fortnite updates or all those things. So there are protections that you get add there as well, and of course, it's good to have create a separate login for your children as well, and of course, like we mentioned in the first slide, make sure that it does not have administrative privileges. Backups are one of the most important aspects of hardening a system, protecting yourself. We covered this a bit in the first video as well. So if you're doing weekly backups, and if you either, let's say you have hardware failure, or you are a victim of a malware attack, you don't have much to worry about. It's annoying because you have to pull from the backup, and it's obviously going to give you a little bit of downtime, but your data is safe. You could restore to where you were before. So backups are super important. Um, and yes, the next part, we could actually set restore points as well. So in your Windows control panel under System and Security, you can go to System Protection. You'll see that you could set restore points. So if something happens to your system, especially in terms of malware infection, you could just roll back and restore from the previous uninfected point. Password reset disk, very useful just in case if you think you might ever forget your password. So you could save this to a thumb drive, for example. So that's something you can keep in a safe place, keep in a lockbox in case it's ever needed. Another way to back up your files, if you don't want to go the physical hard drive route, it is becoming more and more common these days to back up with the cloud. So you could use services like Google Drive or OneDrive to back up your files. So this is using a surge protector or a UPS device. This is something that could help protect from hardware damage. If there's an electrical surge, they have been known to damage motherboards or memory. So this is something that could really mess with your system. And if you haven't been doing backups, then you're totally out of luck at that point, because it could just really fry your whole system. So having those backups will be very important when you purchase a new system, and then you could restore from those backups. So disabling unnecessary programs and settings. Windows by default comes with just everything turned on. Everything is on, and they do this so that it's easy and accessible. Everything is active for anybody who's looking for any particular service that they have. But the problem is that you end up running a bunch of services that you don't really need. And this can create security risks. So one of the most important ones to disable that a lot of people do not need is remote desktop and remote assistance. So this would be used if for somebody to connect to your system remotely, which if you don't need that, you can sound how that would be scary if somebody actually did that, didn't want them to. So this could potentially be an area that an attacker could exploit. So if you don't need this option, you definitely want to disable this. Now, AUTORUN, we spoke in the first video regarding baiting, and this is leaving like a USB drive maybe out in a parking lot for somebody to find. And we're all we're curious creatures, so a lot of times someone will pick it up and they really curious to see what's on there. They may find just random files, maybe some music files, but what they don't know is that a script is being run in the background. It's being auto run. So disabling autoplay in your Windows settings can help protect against that. So no scripts are being run if you plug in a malicious USB device, or even a CD can also autoplay. Unnecessary startup programs. So this is another thing too. Sometimes you might install some software, and they're also installing software by their by other software that they work with, their partners, and you don't always need it. So checking your startup programs in your task manager, it's a good way to it's good to clean that up, and it could speed up your overall processing level as well, so your computer doesn't run as slow. Disabling unnecessary features and uninstalling unnecessary programs. So you can do a bit of a deeper dive in Control Panel using the Services console, and you could often find really nice websites online that give pointers on certain things that you can disable. Check what they do first. Make sure you don't need them, but I can guarantee you there will be a handful of things that you could definitely disable. Browser add-ons as well. These are things that sometimes they might get added while installing other software. They try and trick you, and they'll just add these random browser add-ons. But with every add-on you add, that's could be a security risk. So once again, this is all about system hardening, disabling things that you don't need. So yeah, browser add-ons is another area that you should definitely look into. Stop and disable unnecessary services. So this can greatly speed up performance by doing this, because a lot of times these things are running in the background and it's just unnecessary. Okay, and now let's look at some Zoom and a smartphone and wireless security recommendations. So with Zoom, obviously everybody's using Zoom now. There's a lot of features that you may not know about. So we'll go over some checklists here. So for general privacy and security, it's recommended to enable a meeting password. This may be situational. If it's a small meeting, it may not be necessary, but if it's an important meeting, a password is definitely recommended. You could use a virtual background if you just kind of want to add a little sense of privacy to your home surrounding. It employs a very cool technology where it kind of adds a green screen kind of effect, and you can upload a very generic office background, or I personally like to use this Seinfeld's living room as my background, so you can have fun with it as well. You can enable end-to-end encryption on the meeting. You set screen sharing for host only and file sharing for host only. This is obviously situational, but if you're in a case where nobody else needs to be sharing their screen or sharing files, it would be recommended to just lock that down from the start. And things that you can disable, chat auto saving. You could disable your automatic video camera, or your that way your video doesn't pop up if you don't want it to. Automatically, it records automatically, so you may want to disable the meeting recording. Attention tracking. These are kind of privacy concerns, so you may not want to gather all of that data about those joining your meeting. Screen sharing for participants and file sharing for participants, like we mentioned before, you want to disable those if they are unnecessary. You want to keep your meeting ID and the password private. Remove unknown participants. If somebody happens to join very randomly, you might just be better off to remove them. You could lock the meeting once everybody's joined, and you definitely want to make sure that you clear and end the meeting for participants when everybody's finished. Okay, and here's a kind of a joint infographics of some more safety checklists. The requiring a password, we covered that. Set screen sharing to host only, disabling file transfers. So we covered a little bit of these. Muting is important, and this is something that happens where somebody may walk away for a moment, or they're not extremely focused on the meeting, and you hear a lot of that background noise. There is an option to mute everyone, and you can actually additionally allow participants. You could check so that they cannot even unmute themselves. So if it's a very important presentation where you need undivided attention and no interruptions, you can limit the participants' ability to even unmute themselves. You can remove participants, and you can um, disallow them for rejoining once they've been removed. So yeah, these are some really good safety settings. I recommend you take a look at all of these options. That way you can strengthen your Zoom meetings. Okay, and securing your smartphone. Multi-factor authentication is definitely recommended. We covered that in the first presentation as well. This would be using your password, and also maybe using an app like Google Authentication to add an additional layer of a password PIN. Using a secured lock screen, you want to make sure that your phone will eventually lock if you maybe step away from it, or so that it, or especially if you lose it, that way nobody can get into your device. Turn off Bluetooth and Wi-Fi when not in use. When you're out and about in the public, I always recommend try not to use public Wi-Fi as much as possible. And in terms of Bluetooth, there are Bluetooth attack techniques. One's called blue snarfing, where they may exploit your Bluetooth connection to steal files from your phone. You want to make sure that Find My Device is turned on in case you ever lose it. You can encrypt your phone's data. That will help protect your sensitive data. Turn off geotagging in the phone and on social media. So this is very important when you take photos, especially, and then you go and share those on your social media. A lot of times those are geotagged by default. So if an attacker is attempting social engineering and they find your photos online and they look at the metadata, it's called, and the geotagging, they might be able to specify exactly where you live or exactly where you hang out. Let's say you take a photo at your local cafe, for example. So disabling geotagging is highly recommended. So let's go on to securing your wireless network. You always want to change default passwords on a router. Believe it or not, there's actually websites that I guess you can kind of call them the Google of internet devices, and you could actually search for any device that's connected to the internet, whether it's a router or it's a refrigerator, a thermostat. And this is where it's important, because if you are still using a default password, anybody can just give it a try and then log into your system. So you want to restrict access, encrypt the data on your network, enable WPA2, protecting your SSID. Some people recommend you could actually disable the SSID so it's not your wireless network isn't known to the public. There are still ways to get it, but for general public, that would be a way to sort of obfuscate your wireless network. Most wireless routers come with a built-in firewall, so that's highly recommended to use as an extra layer of defense. You want to keep your software updated for your router. You could also use a virtual private network, a VPN, to encrypt all of the data that you're sending on your network. And you might want to check with your internet provider. A lot of times they offer additional antivirus, anti-malware software that you can install and run internally on your network. So great, that covers part 2 of the cybersecurity awareness training. Reminder, in part 1, which you'll find a video on the C4 YouTube, we covered a lot on malware, password cracking, safe password habits. And in part 3, I'm going to go over a more hands-on lab where we explore a spear phishing attempt that is successful. The victim clicks on a link, and you get to see what happens in the background from the attacker's perspective and how they gain access to that system. Great. Thanks a lot for watching.